Now, as part of this table assembly that you're going to draw, you're going to put weld symbols on it. So let us think about what kinds of welds you might use. And here is the table in 3D. So looking at the underside of it, we have, gosh, there's a bunch of weld places. There's a frame, like a picture frame, made out of pieces of angle iron. And we're going to weld that to the tabletop. So you might think about, okay, how would you like to do that? You might think fillet weld. That's probably what you would use. You might think, if we just do a continuous weld all the way along, that might get awfully hot. It might cause warpage, and maybe we don't need that much weld material anyway. We could consider doing an intermittent weld, a stitch weld. And then we could think about, do we just want to stitch weld the outside leg of this frame? Do we also want to weld on the inside of that angle iron frame? Or both? Then, from this angle you can see where these square tube legs hit the tabletop. You probably want a weld there attaching the leg to the tabletop. The thing is, though, you can't do a weld all around, can you? Because on the outside two sides of that tube, there's an angle iron frame going around. So it's just the two inside faces of the tube that you would fillet weld. But you might want to weld the angle iron frame where it lands on the tube on these two sides, there, and so forth. Now, how about that angle iron frame? In each corner, there's a 45-degree angle. It's been cut at 45 degrees so that those pieces can fit together. What do you want to do there? Do you want some kind of groove weld sticking those edges together? And then what else? Those two smaller braces, these little guys, that weld into the sides of the legs, you probably want some kind of small fillet weld, maybe an all-around, going around the ends of those angles. And you can decide whether or not you want the two angle iron braces to be welded together somehow in the middle. So those are all things to think about. Now I have a couple of scribbly examples for you. We'll look at these. And when I say scribbly, I am not kidding. So I sketched out the bottom view of this table on a whiteboard with some markers. And then, and this was a year or two ago, another class did this table assignment, and we were meeting in person at that time. So we brainstormed, what kinds of welds might you use? So on this sketch, some people thought, well, you'd probably want a stitch weld around that frame. So all around, it's a 1/4 inch angle iron, and if you're just welding on one side of the angle iron, then you'd want a 1/4 inch weld. So there's the fillet symbol, 1/4 inch size. What size do you want the stitches? Well, we don't know. You could make the stitches 2 inches long, 12 inches on center. That could work. Let's go to the next slide. Here's a different scribbly brainstorming session on this table. Now, some other people might think, well, let's weld a stitch weld, a fillet weld that's intermittent, on both sides of this angle iron frame. if you do that, it's a 1/4 inch angle, so the weld size should be only 3/4 the size of the material thickness. So you'd have 3/16 welds. You could have 2-inch stitches. They could be, let's say, 10 inches on center. And you might want to offset those stitches so that the heat didn't line up right in the same spot. So you could make fillet welds on both sides that are intermittent and that are offset. And again with the all-around symbol. Okay, backing up to the first example again. What else have we got? Let's look at these legs. Now, what the heck is happening here? I think this first group missed something. Welding the leg to the tabletop, it might be that the first group didn't want to weld the leg to the tabletop. They just wanted to weld the angle iron frame to the outside of the legs, and they thought that would be adequate, and they're probably right. Oh, that's it. This group pointed here, so here's where a tube leg attaches to the tabletop, and now we can't say all around, can we? Because there's an angle iron frame in the way on 2 sides. So we can say 1/4 inch fillet weld, and then in the tail of the symbol where we put additional information, we will say 2 sides, 2s means 2 sides, and we will say do that 4 times. So this 2s4x means weld 2 sides of the tube with a 1/4 inch weld, and do that 4 times because there are 4 tube legs. All right, what else? How about this joint at the 45-degree angle where the angled pieces of frame meet each other? Were it me, I think I would do a square weld. It's not that thick and it's not that critical. I just want them to stick together a little bit. So there's a square weld symbol, arrow side, so you're welding the arrow side. You could make it 1/8. You could not say anything about size. I think this 1/8 means the depth of penetration. So this says just penetrate halfway through. You could omit the size if you wanted to. And then, let me see, so there are 4 of those 45-degree things, so you could say 4 times out here in the tail. Going to the next picture. In this conversation, people had different opinions. Some people thought a square weld, some people wanted a bevel weld, and some people wanted a V weld. So I just wrote, you can choose one of these 3 options. I don't know about you, but when I think about pieces of angle iron welding together under a table, I think to myself, I think a bevel weld or a V weld is kind of overkill. You're just sticking these angle irons together. So what I'm saying is, if it were me, I would choose a square weld, and I would write 4 times in the tail. Still thinking about the tubes, this group thought that you could write the instructions for welding the angle iron on the outside of the legs up here in the what is that? The front view. So that's where you see that connection, true size and shape. So they suggested writing a 1/4 inch fillet here in the front view, 2 sides, because it's only 2 sides of the tube, and 4 times because there are 4 tubes. This group decided to put that on the bottom view. That would be fine. let's think about these small angle iron braces. I forget what size they are. Aren't they 1.5 by 3/16 or something like that? So what do we need? We need to weld those braces to the tubes. So this symbol here, I think, this 1/8" fillet all around, must be talking about welding the ends of the braces to the tubes. And there are 4 tubes, so we say 4 times. I don't know what this thing on the bottom is. This is probably somebody welding the tube to the tabletop. It's a funny place to put it, though. Now, some people in this conversation thought we should weld these 2 braces together where they cross to prevent the thing from flexing and moving around. It's thin angle iron, and if you weld on both sides, 3/4 of 3/16 is a little more than 1/8, but 1/8 would be fine. And there's a fillet weld symbol saying fillet on both sides, arrow side and far side. This group didn't think that was necessary, so they did not put fillet welds in there. Now, let me just say that these are all options. And if you want to do things that are different from either of these scribbly pictures, that is totally fine too. You are the drafter. It is up to you to pick what weld symbols you would like to draw. As long as they match, you know, the kind of shape that we've got here, it will be fine. So put whatever symbols you prefer on your drawing. These symbols, you just draw lines and write text. I do not know of a better way to do it. Just make the line, just write the text, and that's it. And in one of these handouts, I gave you a handout that lists the AWS sizes for each of these symbols.